Hi, everyone. Today I sat down with Cheryl, who is the creator and podcast host of Homeschool How To podcast. We talked all about her perspective on homeschooling, how she started her podcast, and then her perspective on public schooling. This conversation was incredible. I enjoyed talking to her, and I hope you guys enjoy listening. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm very excited to talk to you and hear more about your podcast and what you do in the homeschooling space. If you could just share who you are, I know listeners would love to know more about you.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Cheryl. I was a government worker for 16 years. I did everything that, kind of mainstream does, which is, go to college, not really knowing
Mhm.
what I wanted to do with my life, spending all that
Yeah.
money, and got into government work because that's kind of what my parents did.
Mhm.
And, got married, had my son, sent him to daycare while I, went back to work. And not until COVID did it kind of dawn on me that I started seeing some push and pull with what my husband and I wanted as parents and
Yeah.
what was in our way. And
Hmm.
I guess that had never even been a thought of my mind. It's just like, hey, we're the
Yeah.
parents. We decide what happens, right? And
Hmm.
no, there's a lot of things that go on with our kids that we
Right.
actually don't decide when they're
Hmm.
in, the educational system. And he was even in a
Hmm.
private daycare, but because they were
Yeah.
um, you know, d doing the protocols through the state and getting
Hmm.
audits done by the state,
Yeah.
they had to follow them. So it was pretty crazy. So then I
Hmm.
started kind of getting into the homeschool world, thinking like, could
Hmm.
we actually do this? Like, oh my God,
Hmm.
I don't want to be the weird people. But I started taking my son to homeschool meetups because those were kind of the only people getting together during COVID anyway,
Right.
and like
Yeah.
asking them all these questions. And my eyes really opened at like, wow, there's a whole other way we can live our lives. And
Yeah.
it didn't happen overnight, but it slowly opened my eyes to like, I don't
Mm.
have to live my life according to what is expected of me, what's mainstream.
Yeah.
Um, there's just a different way to do it.
Yeah, I love that how you said that about there's a different way to live life because that's really what homeschooling is. I mean, it's just a total alternative way of living. So how does that kind of look for you now versus where you were before when your son was in daycare?
It's a complete 180. I mean, I'm
Mm.
like my
Yeah.
family and like my former friends, kind of look at me like I've gone off the deep end. But it's just
Yeah, I get
because
that.
I like make sourdough bread once a week and we have a
Yeah,
garden that we
yeah.
grow some food in. And
Hmm.
um, it's just funny that, we'll
Yeah.
read labels. And not to say that we don't let our kids have anything. Like, I told
Right.
them, hey, if you guys are good during this podcast, I'll take you out to ice cream after. Like, of course,
Right.
there's going to be crap in that ice cream, but you know what? I think our bodies can
Yeah.
also handle a lot too. But
Yeah. Yeah, for
it
sure.
it's different in that we wake up, when we want to. I mean, granted, I wake up at
So
5:30
important.
because I have a job now that I want to do, which is,
Hmm.
the podcast and the Instagram
Hmm.
page and
Yeah.
releasing products that help parents that are going through the journey as I was.
Yeah.
And so it's like what I want to do, not
Hmm.
dreading to do. And that's really how I lived through school, through college,
Yeah.
through my government job, was just dreading the next day every day. And so,
Mm.
and I didn't
Wow.
even, I just gave myself chills because honestly, like until you asked
Yeah.
me that question and I like really talked it out, that has been the
Yeah.
biggest change. I literally
Yeah.
went through decades of dreading the next day and we
Yeah.
don't now. And not to say that it's blissful and perfect now,
Sure. Yeah.
but I don't dread it.
That's amazing. What a release for your family. Just that stress, relief. And I know I've seen a lot of families who transition from the public school system, and that's something they talk about, how like the stress load is just totally different, where they can just live and be at peace. I mean, granted, like you said, it's not going to be perfect, but it's just slower. I mean, and kids can embrace how they learn. And like you said, waking up at a different time when their bodies are ready to wake up, that's so important. And to kind of transition to your podcast, what inspired you to start that?
Well, because I was going to these homeschool meetups, talking to local homeschoolers, and I really
Mhm.
like, I went in sometimes with like pen and paper, like asking them
Yeah.
all these questions. And they probably, I don't know if they were annoyed with me or what, but they were good sports. But I
Yeah.
met somebody that actually had a podcast on
Mm.
a totally different arena.
Sure.
But it was the first time it was presented to me like, wait, anybody can just have a podcast. That's you can just,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, yeah, you
Yeah.
don't need permission to do things. I was just so
Mm-hmm.
ingrained to think that we needed like permission to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
started a podcast interviewing homeschooling families, basically asking the same things I was asking to the local homeschoolers, but
That's
across the
amazing.
country and now across the
Mm.
world, really.
Yeah, that's great. So what have you kind of seen? Like, is there a typical response that you get from families, like based on homeschooling? Like, what are the kind of trends you're seeing right now within the homeschooling space?
So I think the biggest thing, the biggest shock to me has been the amount of teachers that are leaving the school system or have left the school
Yes.
system to homeschool their kids.
Yes.
I mean, that's
Mm,
huge. And
it
all
is.
of them say you do not need to be a teacher to homeschool your kids. Absolutely not. You just have to love your
Mhm.
kids.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
but I mean, that's huge. When I think of, I'm in the state of
Mm,
New York, everything that you have to go through to get to be a teacher, the four
yeah.
years of school, plus usually a 2 year, um, a master's program and the
Hmm.
internships and, getting that
Yeah.
job and getting your tenure to then leave
Yeah.
when you have
Hmm.
kids, that is huge. It says so much. So
It
that was
does.
big.
Yeah.
Another thing I would say that really shocked me was that there's actually not like a set of criteria that your child has to know by any certain age. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because you asked me before we started the call, like, oh, is there anything that you're working on? And I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
I wrote a guide on like what to teach. But the
Hmm.
thing
Hmm.
is that a guide is different than like, we're going to take your
Right.
kids away if they don't know this by age blank, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So it was so like I think it took me years to really get that concept of like if your kid's really into World War II, you can just spend an entire year learning about World War II. You don't even
Yeah.
really have to talk about the Aztecs, Incas, and Mayas if that's just not something that they're really, you can touch
Right.
on it. But if it's not
Yeah.
something that they're
Sure.
into, you don't have to delve into it. And
Hmm.
so it's like a whole new concept of learning about like different ways to
Yeah.
educate kids and through things that interest them. So like if
Yeah.
they are interested in monster trucks, well maybe we teach them how to read through books about monster trucks. Maybe we teach them
Hmm.
math through like how we take apart a monster
Right.
truck and how you count the nuts and bolts or like, just of course that's like a simplistic way, but
Yeah.
that there's
No,
just
that's
so
great.
many better ways to learn. And then I think the biggest shock to me too was learning about the history of the education system and how it was
Mm,
not
yeah.
created based on how kids learn best. And okay,
Yeah.
30 kids the same age with a blackboard and textbook is the way to do it. It's like, no,
Hmm.
that research was never done. The
Yes.
research was how do we create a nation of obedient workers?
That's right. That's right. So to kind of go a little bit deeper into the history, um, did you find those things out after you started to homeschool, or when was the time period of that when you started looking into that?
So when I started the podcast, I wasn't actually homeschooling. My kids were young, and my son, though we had pulled him out of daycare because they were masking 3-year-olds in New York. You don't have to
Mhm.
homeschool a 3-year-old. He doesn't
Right.
have to be in school. So we were not technically homeschooling then, but the premise of the podcast was, should I homeschool my kids? Like,
Yeah.
how weird are we going to end up? And so I was kind of like just learning about the lifestyle and what the requirements were and
Yeah.
if it was really doable and
Hmm.
learning about it. I learned about the education system through my podcast, through having different
Yeah.
guests on that really opened my eyes. And I
Hmm.
just off the top of my head, people like Alex Newman, who wrote the book Indoctrinating Our Children to
Hmm.
Death, and
Yeah.
Dr. Peter Gray, who wrote Free to
Mm.
Learn,
Hmm.
and this other guy, Chris, that was on very early on, somebody that I like watched his videos and really like the
Yeah.
whole like unveiling of our whole government system. And,
Hmm.
it's not right versus left. It is actually same bird, but opposite wings to the same bird. And
Hmm. Yeah.
like, yeah, like people talk about the rabbit hole. I went down it and it can get depressing and feel a little
Yeah.
overwhelming, but I
Yeah.
think and I hope that I help to empower people because once you know it, you can then slowly take steps to empower yourselves to do better for your family.
That's great. I love that. And to kind of transition a little bit, how has your homeschooling experience impacted your family?
Oh, I think hugely. When I just think about, like you said, that rushed morning when,
Mm,
my 7-year old, he's almost 8, but like he's going through growth spurts, he's going through different things, like his synapses are making connections. And,
yeah.
if for him, reading is taking a little bit longer than maybe a lot of people I do talk to on my podcast, although a lot of people say it does take longer for boys,
Yeah.
especially very active boys. Um, I think just it has impacted him and that it's allowing his body to do what his
Hmm.
body is meant to do. So if
Yeah.
sleep is that, if learning to read a little bit later is that, then that's what we have the
That's great.
ability to do. We are
Mm,
definitely more active than we would be if I were sitting in my cubicle still. And
yeah.
if he were sitting in a classroom, we have tomorrow a co-op that we do. And I say co-op loosely because I really am not like, I'm not a co-op girl, but this is like a group that meets up every week,
Yeah.
either at a park or
Oh, that's
playground
great.
or a
Mm,
museum, like that sort of thing. So tomorrow's their
yeah.
field day. So we're going to be
Oh,
out doing that.
that's
Wednesdays is
fun.
ukulele. And, so all
Ah,
the families get together and the little ones play, the little siblings. And then when he's out of his
oh, that's
class,
fun.
like they all play. So Thursdays, my daughter has gymnastics. Fridays, my son does a wilderness class. So I would
Great.
say it's impacting us in that, like, we have and the word that somebody used for me and I didn't get it at the time, but we have agency over our day. And I think
Yes.
now to me, what that means is that we decide what we want to do and what we want to learn about. And yes,
Hmm.
of course, there's things in the day that you do because you have to. Like I have to do the
Right.
dishes, I have to make dinner.
Right.
I should work out, I should
Yeah.
vacuum, I do have to make a little money.
Yeah.
But we're doing it the way that we want to, and not just because that's what most people do, and we never stop to question it.
Yes. I love that. That's great. And then how has this transition to homeschooling impacted you as a mom?
Well, I think that, I mean, it definitely it's trying at times, right?
Mm.
Because when you are
Hmm.
with your kids all day, and a lot of people
Yeah.
say, like, oh, I could never spend all day with my kids. But it's like, well, then why are you creating humans that you don't want to be around? Like, my
Right.
goal is to make like have children that other people enjoy. And I try to tell my son that
Mm.
all the time because he is that super hyper, like gets in these I don't know if I've never gotten like looked at for ADHD or whatnot, but my guess is they would probably want to medicate him if he were in school. Um, but he's, I try to talk to him all the time about like, we don't need to change who we are to make people like us, but
Mhm.
when people enjoy being around you, you're going to see how many more opportunities present themselves
Right.
to you in life. And so I think like
Mm.
getting to think about that and like watch my children, watch him, come to me and say, this kid was mean, or a lot of parents would say, a lot of parents would say, oh, my kid's getting bullied. I'm actually there to witness like the entire thing. So a lot of times I say to them,
Mm.
you're not actually being bullied. I saw what you did to the kid first, and that was their reaction to your
Yeah.
behavior. And
Mm.
that really opened up my eyes too, to like
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody's kids getting bullied, but nobody's standing up saying my kid was the bully. Like, where are all those parents, right? All of our kids are the bully because a lot of times I think it is, and not to say there aren't bullies, of course there are, but I'm witnessing the entire story happening and
Yeah.
really trying to say to my child, like, okay, well, and I do try to validate his feelings too, but
Sure.
also
Yeah.
like, all right, if we're doing something that pushes people away or makes them react negatively to you, we have to analyze that, and how could
Hmm.
we do it differently, and
Yeah.
how would you feel if they were doing this to you? So I think the parenting has just gotten more like I get to see the story from A to Z and not
Yeah.
a snippet of what he's coming home with from
Mm.
school or what the teacher's putting on a report.
Yeah. That's great. I really like that. And then what kind of homeschooling style do you use? Do you use a curriculum? Are you more into unit studies? Like, what does that look like for you?
It looks like chaos. No, but realistically, so right now we're just wrapping up almost like 2 months of a spring unit study.
Great.
And I do have like a reading curriculum that we do. It's an online reading curriculum, Reading Horizons. And I
Oh
know
yeah.
there's a lot of controversy
Yeah.
around like the online stuff, especially for the little ones. And I get that. We've also used All About Reading and, all that good stuff. And I
Hmm.
just kind of like to try out different ones because
Sure.
of
Yeah.
having the podcast and
Yeah.
because we get to see what works better for him. So
Yeah.
so when we're not doing a unit study, I will have him do like Reading Horizons and Matthew C. And
Mhm.
then we just read books together, and I'll get books from like Read Aloud Revival has great book lists, and I'll
Oh,
order
that's awesome.
them. Yeah, I'll order the books from my library just to come right to the library. I pick up like 30 at a time and we read those
Mm,
throughout the month.
that's great.
And then there are days where it's just like, yeah, it's hectic and we don't open a book and you feel guilty
Hmm.
about it and whatever, and you move on with your life. But
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
but yeah, I would say like we still haven't found like our daily or weekly rhythm. We're still
Hmm.
trying out
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
But I do love the unit studies. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's a topic that hopefully your kid is interested in or that's relevant like springtime, or
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
it's July, maybe it's the Revolutionary War since we have,
Yeah.
July 4th coming up. But you would
Hmm.
then that would be the center and you would have reading in relation to that topic,
Yeah.
writing in relation to that storytelling, the reading composition. You would have math, geography, science. You might do a baking activity or an art project or listen
Yeah.
to a song from the time period. All these different things that intertwine with that one topic that they are interested in. So, like an example, we did. One week was butterflies, and we ordered caterpillars from Amazon. I feel so like guilty saying that. We did try to
No, that's
find them.
awesome.
We tried to find them
That's
out in
awesome.
nature, but they like didn't turn into the pretty butterflies. They were ugly moths. So this year we did like the painted lady caterpillars and
That's
watched
so
that
cool.
process while we read books about it. We watched some YouTube documentary videos about it. We listened to a folk song about butterflies and looked at where the
Love it.
migration happens on the globe and on the map. So it's like they're getting all these different
Yeah.
subjects covered, but within that one topic.
I love that. That's awesome. And then to kind of go back to the public school thing, what we were talking about earlier, um, what were the main, like the homeschool families you have talked to that have pulled their kids out of public school? What were some of the main reasons that you were seeing from the different people you interview?
Yeah. So one interview that always sticks with me is Kiri. She was a public school teacher, and she just said it went from where I used to have the ability to create my own lessons and tailor them
Hmm.
to what my kids enjoy and kind of like where they were.
Yeah.
But it slowly turned into over the years. This is what you have to teach. These are the books you have to teach. This is the
Mm,
lessons that you have to teach. And
yeah.
these are the grades that I need your kids to get. And she
Hmm.
had said it even gotten to a point where, like their bonuses each year, like their raises were dependent on test scores.
Oh my
And
word.
I remember one teacher saying how it might have even been her. There was like a classroom they stuck they stuck a classroom in the basement. These poor kids were in a basement, and all the voices were just ricocheting off the walls and the floor. And the administrative office was getting new carpets at the time. So the teacher asked, "Can I have your old carpets to absorb some of the sound?" And the school said, "No, it's not written in the contract. You cannot have the old carpets." And it was just like, oh my gosh, is that
Oh,
really like everything has to be written down and just that it's
yeah.
for the testing and the test scores, they drive the funding. And
Hmm. Hmm.
it's no longer about is the child learning, it is about what is the test score so that we can drive the funding or prove that the funds that they gave us
Yeah.
last year were valid. And more teachers say that. And of course the bullying, like there is some awful stuff going on in the
Yeah.
school. Recess is so much less than it used to
Hmm.
be. They're cutting
Hmm.
that down to 15-20 minutes.
Yeah.
Lunchtime a lot of time is assigned seats and they can't even talk to their friends, which
Yes, I've heard
throws
that
the whole
before.
like your child won't be socialized if you homeschool right out the window. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, so I think the teachers are seeing I want my child to have fresh air, be able to run around and play.
Hmm. Hmm.
The shelter in place drills, I've had a couple. people, that's one of my biggest concerns. Like, why? I'm not going to
Mhm.
traumatize my kid with a shelter in place drill. If it's not safe, I'm not going to send them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like if it's that frequent that it happens that we need shelter in
Right.
place drills, let's maybe not go. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
but I had a school resource officer. She homeschooled her kids, but she was the one to implement the shelter in place drills at the school that
wow.
she worked at. And she said it is traumatic. And I
Yeah.
know I've had some teachers say, no, it's not. The kids don't know what's going on at a young age. But I still think that there is some trauma, there's some lasting
Oh,
impact
yeah. Yeah.
to
There
that.
has to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
teachers are just seeing that there's better ways to learn. It doesn't have to be like most of them will tell you too, I'm there to babysit. And even I had a teacher recently say, we're really just making sure that everybody's okay at the end of the day. Like nobody's getting physically
Mm,
hurt. That's their goal.
yes. Yes. And I know I keep hearing stories about physical abuse and sexual abuse that's going on. And I honestly think like if you can get your kids out, get them out because the stories that I'm hearing, and not to fearmonger, but it is reality. I mean, the headlines, the statistics are real. And yeah, I don't know if you follow, there's an account that I follow on Instagram. It's Official Herd, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And she posts some very intriguing things. I mean, not necessarily intriguing in a good way, more of an eye opener, I should say. Um, just headlines of what's really going on and news clips that, yeah, I appreciate what you said. And I think from what I'm seeing, I think a lot of teachers are seeing that they're there to teach kids, but the children are actually losing their childhood. They're not even really being kids in the school system. I mean, they're just totally losing agency, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great way to put it. Like this is their one childhood. Is
hmm That's all they get. Yeah. Yeah. And then to kind of transition a little bit, um, what do you offer for families who are interested in leaving the school system? I know you said you have a guide, your podcast. Let's talk a little more about that.
Yeah. So the podcast is, I think, 172 episodes right now of
Great.
just hearing all different homeschoolers' experiences. And sometimes I'll bring on experts,
Awesome.
just authors, just to get their perspective as well. And then, yeah, I have my free 30-day guide, which anybody can get for free. And it's just like what I've gathered as the most important things to
Mm,
start with in your first 30 days of homeschooling, which actually doesn't have anything to do with curriculum at all. And then from there, I was kind of hearing from parents that, I want to homeschool, but I just don't even know what to teach. So I
right.
went through all my episodes again and I went through the laws and, hslda.org has a lot
hmm
of the
Yeah, they're
standards on
amazing.
what you are required to teach
hmm
in your state. So I
Yeah.
put a whole 17-page bundle together with like 5 printouts on like templates and
Awesome.
attendance records and different things like what does it mean when they're asking for reading and then writing and then reading composition and then English. It's like, what is all this really? What do you want from us? So I broke all that out. So
Yeah, that's
that
great.
that's been very helpful. And then I do have a course on how to work and homeschool, which is
So
like
important.
a 2.5 hour course, just walking people through the process of to go from like, oh, I'd want to homeschool, but I can't because I have to make money. A lot of people
Yeah,
are single parents
right.
and walking them through the process of like, okay, this is what we can do financially. This is what we can do for money. This is what we can do to cut back. And just going through all the
hmm
things that the people I've
Yeah,
interviewed and myself have done to make working and homeschooling simultaneously work for
yeah.
them.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome, especially like that working and homeschooling. I see a lot of stuff about that. People asking online, like, how can I do this? I want to do this. I'm a single parent. I don't know how to do this financially. So I think that's really great that you're doing that.
There's so many resources today that
hmm
especially people that homeschooled like back in the 80s that just weren't available, and it's really
Yeah,
never been easier to homeschool. You just kind of have to know where to look
that's
and
right.
what can work based on your situation.
That's right. I love that advice. And then kind of what do you think um how can people handle that schedule of working, being a busy mom, and then also homeschooling?
Yeah, and especially if you have multiple kids,
Yeah,
it's very
yeah.
it's difficult for sure.
hmm
Like I said, it's never been easier. There are so many resources out there, and just for example, like where my son takes ukulele, That's actually like a little micro school. I don't think they're allowed to be called a
Oh,
micro school because of how it works. But there are these like pop-up educational
yeah.
centers. I think they're
Mm-hmm.
called the
Mm-hmm.
space. That's why they're called that. But different and she was a teacher who left and she
Mm.
kind of has this building now that they rent and the parents all get together like they pay, but then they also have like a room that they can work in, little coffee
Oh,
bar area.
that's
There's
so
a teacher
cool.
that comes in to teach like the basics of whether it might be like reading, math, and science. And they do projects. I know recently she was saying they had someone from a bank come in and they had little stations set up to
Oh
have
my
little
word.
like businesses and they were all like teaching the kids about how credit works and the
That's
finance
amazing.
industry and interest. So and that's just a Monday and Tuesday program. Then on Wednesdays they have music lessons, which is what we're a part of. I actually don't
Mm-hmm.
do the Monday Tuesday thing, even though I love it. It's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah,
um
sure.
but we do, and it's so my son started on the ukulele, which is like that's his stepping stone to guitar. And the lessons,
That's
there's
awesome.
like 4 kids in the lesson, so you're not getting an entire
Yeah,
classroom. It's very one-on-one,
I
holds
love
them
that.
accountable to like practice
Mm-hmm.
throughout the week. and
Mm-hmm.
um and yeah, it's just a fun place for like I said, the other siblings to play while they're in the lesson. And
Yeah.
like the wilderness program I was telling you about that he does in the spring and in the fall, that's a drop off program. So a parent actually doesn't even have to be there. So there are all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things. It may not be that, like, okay, I can work from home and my kids are going to do this program. It might be on
Yeah.
Mondays, this is how we work it out. On
Yeah.
Tuesdays, this is how we work it out, which may seem chaotic at first, but also like look at the school system is really going to the same place 5 days a week exciting at all? I mean, I didn't like
Exactly.
doing it when I went to my cubicle 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to have
Yeah.
a little change up. In fact, when I traveled for work, I loved that because it did change it up. So
Yes.
there are so many different resources available today. It's just knowing where to look, how to find them. And,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's even just okay, I'm a homeschool mom. I know the lady down the street's a homeschool mom. I'm free on Mondays or maybe Wednesday mornings, and
Mm-hmm.
she's free
Yeah.
in opposite time. And we,
Swap. Yeah.
swap kids. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so smart. Yeah, I really like that because I think it seems so something like we just can't do it, but you can. There's so many options, like you said, and you can get creative and really figure out a way to do it. And I think that's a big part of homeschooling, sacrificing and becoming flexible, which I will say is not the easiest for me. So if I ever homeschool my kids, which I plan to if I have children at some point, that's something that I'm gonna have to grow in. But I think so many homeschool moms and dads inspire me because you guys really have learned to become creative and flexible and just manage multiple things. It's awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
seems daunting until you're doing it. And then it's like,
Right.
oh, this
Right.
is way easier than getting them
Hmm.
up at 5:45 in the morning, rushing a
Yeah.
breakfast down their throat and getting them onto a bus, like
Hmm.
arguing and yelling the whole way. This is so much
Yeah.
easier.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you don't mind sharing, what are your ages for your kids? And then like how long have you been homeschooling officially?
Yeah, so my son is 7. He'll be 8 soon. So
Great.
he's in technically like the second grade is what we're
Hmm.
registered in with the school. My daughter's 3, so I don't do anything formal with her at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Um, we she does watch some TV. I always like to be upfront about that because there
Yeah.
are a lot of homeschool families that don't do TV, and that's so awesome. I love that. We're just not one of them.
Yeah,
So
that's
the
right.
TV is
Flexible. That's
babysitting
good.
them right now. But yeah, but like for instance, I make sure to read to them a lot. And like this morning, we had a few minutes, just me and her before my son woke up. So we took out a
Oh,
game that it's called Double Shutter. And where she's rolling the dice, and I'm telling her,
that's
like,
great.
okay, this dice has a 5 on it. Let's count the fives, and this one has a 2. Let's add them up. Okay, well, now we have to find the
Oh,
7 on
love
so
it.
it just little things like that you don't
Yeah,
think about are that's educational. And
that's right.
she's there
Yeah.
for all the conversations that we have. And I love to also like make parents realize that the conversations, that's homeschooling too. So like every time we're
Hmm.
in the car driving somewhere, we'll either like sometimes we listen to music, but other times, we might put on a audiobook, or other
Yeah.
times we just talk and,
I love
I'll
that.
say like, okay, who can find the letter C first? And so now they're all trying to
Ah.
look that, she's learning her letters. My son
Mm-hmm.
already hopefully knows them all, and or like for him, I
Yeah.
might say like, okay, who can identify the first word? Who can read the first word? Or who can spot a hawk? Or who knows what
That's so
direction we're
great. I love
going
that.
in? Like, and I'll have my son tell me based off of where the sun is in the sky. Like, are we going north, east, southwest? And,
Oh,
just
that's
little
great.
things like that you don't
Yeah.
think about as being as educational as they are,
Yeah.
but they really are. And they provoke other conversation,
That's
which,
right.
yeah, it's just, and then you're learning about what your kid is really interested in.
That's great. I really like that. And then, what are some things that you would say to homeschooling families who, or I should say, families who want to start homeschooling? What would you say to encourage them?
I think like it's really scary at first just to go against
Yeah.
the norm on
Yeah.
anything you do, right?
Hmm.
Whether you're starting a business or taking your kids out of the traditional school system. So
Hmm.
I think like learning, which is why I started the podcast, to learn about why people do this, why they
Yeah.
don't do this. And um so that's what I try to help parents with is like, listen, I've done the research. Here's what can help you. And a lot of times
Yeah.
it's even just, what am I going to say to like the grandparents or to aunts and
Hmm.
uncles? Because they
Yeah.
don't know about homeschooling. They don't know why
Hmm.
anybody would homeschool. They didn't do any research. And somebody is going to come at you with like, this is a bad idea. So I
Yeah.
think really sitting down and go, and I have an ebook, or yeah, I have an ebook too. I always forget about that. But in my ebook, and it kind of summarizes everything I've learned over the last 3 years of interviewing
That's great.
homeschooling families. So in my ebook, I actually like say, like, let's sit down and talk about what will your rebuttals be? And here are some common rebuttals.
So
Here are some
important.
statistics on
Mm,
like literacy rates of kids that are graduating
yes.
today, which are
Which
really
is scary.
low. Yeah, they're in
Yeah.
like 22% of 12th
Mhm.
graders are proficient readers. I mean, that's really bad.
Bad.
So
Yeah.
when you look at, the shelter in place drills, the not getting out to run
Hmm.
around because recess is only 15 minutes, being under the fluorescent lights all day, eating the cafeteria food, all
Hmm.
learning subjects all split up instead of like
Yeah.
around
Integrated.
something
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
integrated and around a topic that your kid
Hmm.
enjoys. Those
Yeah.
are all really good reasons. And so like sitting down and actually writing it out, what are the benefits for homeschooling, and what
Yeah.
are the reasons that I'm scared to homeschool? Maybe
Mm.
for me it was, oh my gosh, they're going to resent me because they don't have a prom to go to.
Oh. Oh.
That was like
Oh.
literally my biggest fear. And then that's something that parents will message me too. Like people that, hate
Oh.
homeschooling, they'll be like, you're going to deprive them of the prom. And,
Oh.
which is funny because I just learned, my husband just told me that he didn't even go to his prom because he had no interest in going. And I'm like, really? All this whole 3 years I've been interviewing people to see if they're going to resent me for not having a prom. But in talking to homeschoolers, I've learned
Yeah.
that there are homeschool proms that like hundreds
That's
and hundreds of
right.
kids go to,
Yeah. Hmm.
or your kid can be invited to the school prom,
That's
that
right. Hmm.
is possible. You can
Yeah.
start your own prom if you don't have one local to you. And
Hmm.
there's just so many other fun things that just because
Yeah.
the school set it up doesn't mean you can't at home. You don't need their
Yeah.
permission.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And then kind of to go back to your podcast a little bit, was there like a moment or an episode where you felt like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like I've heard enough. This is what clicked for me. Was there a moment like that, or was it just kind of a build up? How did that work for
Hmm.
you?
I think it was definitely a build up, but I'm trying to think if there was one that like it might have been the first teacher I got on the show where I was like,
Mm,
wow, this is like a diamond in the
yeah.
rough, a teacher
Yeah.
leaving. Um,
Yeah.
but then like also the teacher saying that like you can do it without the teaching degree. It's not
Hmm.
necessary.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think is someone even saying to me before that if a lot of us don't feel confident enough to homeschool our kids,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
We think, oh, I didn't do well in school. I didn't do good in math.
Mm,
How could I teach my kids? But it's like, well, if the school system didn't do a good enough job with you, why are you sending them to the same place that educated you? So
Exactly.
that was a big eye opener for me, and just to give parents the
Mm,
confidence that they need. And I think that, I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, true, because look at all the things I've learned since I graduated,
yeah.
um, in the workforce, or just like trying to start a podcast. I learned how
Hmm.
to, produce a podcast, how to edit, how to
Yeah.
create an Instagram page, how to market, how to,
Hmm.
sign my, like how to start an LLC, how to sign my
Yeah.
kids on as employees, and how to
Hmm.
file taxes. So, like, these are all things I learned as an adult because it was relevant to me. So I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I am capable, and I don't have to be the one to teach. I think that was a big realization too. I don't have to be the one to teach them like trigonometry if they need
Right.
trigonometry.
100%.
I'm the
Yeah.
liaison to give them
Mm.
what they need for the future that they want for themselves.
Oh, that's
So,
great. Yeah.
yeah, I had one mom that said her daughter, she knew she was going to be like an equestrian, I don't know, something to do with horses. Like she was going to either race horses or have like a
Amazing.
farm, where
Oh, it's
people
cool.
paid her to take care of their horses. So she
Hmm.
didn't need the trigonometry. She didn't need to learn Spanish. She didn't need the college
100%.
degree. So they
Yeah.
just tailored her whole high school career to
Mm.
what she was going to need to start her own business
Yeah.
in this field. And yeah, that's just, so I think that like learning all that was the pinnacle of like,
Yeah.
wow, why are we wasting our time
Uh-huh.
for 12 plus years,
Yeah.
and
And I,
everybody's going to come out the same, knowing the same things? Do we want that?
right. Yeah, right. Especially with, I think, with AI, and so many kids using it, but not actually having the discernment and critical thinking to use it well. They're just using it for answers.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's so important that we create creative thinkers and kids who just are independent and not completely reliant on devices, especially now more than ever, I think.
Oh, so true.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just to kind of wrap up, do you think, sorry, I lost my train of thought. It went right off. It's like, what am I
Take
even
your
saying?
time.
Do you think homeschooling has kind of helped your family like emotionally and health wise? I know you talked a little bit about label reading, so I wasn't sure if homeschooling kind of brought you to that place. How did that work for you guys?
Yeah, I think 1,000%.
Mhm.
We're so much healthier than if I was, in my government job and my kids were in school.
Yeah.
Um, Everything from, now and I think a lot of people had that awakening during COVID that like,
Yeah.
okay, there is a small group of people that are probably trying to kill us all. So they talk about how they want to depopulate the earth,
Yeah.
literally on a TED talk, how if through vaccination we can bring down the population by 9%. And
Yeah.
then, so, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
that will get you like, hey, let's start reading some labels. So, I mean,
That's right.
everything from, I vaccinated my son, he got everything on the CDC schedule, to
Hmm.
now we don't do anything. And
Hmm.
it's not that
Hmm.
I can't say that I would never do anything on the schedule again, but
Right, right.
I learned to look at, okay,
Research.
what
Yeah.
was the death rate of the disease this is supposed to prevent before this vaccine came out? What's the death
Hmm.
rate after? What else
Yeah.
played in? What else played factors? Was there, maybe there wasn't clean water and clean sanitation before, and then after there was. So, looking at the
That's
timelines,
so
and
smart.
yeah, and does it
Mm.
actually prevent it? I mean, because like for instance, like the HPV one, where they say this cures cancer or prevents cancer. Well, that's a load of bull because there's like 100
Mhm.
different strains. It
Yeah.
only says it prevents against 13 of them.
Hmm.
So what's the likelihood that you're going to get the other 87? I mean,
Right.
and then
Right.
what was your
Yeah.
safety trial? Did you compare this against a group of people who didn't get any vaccine at all? Because all of the vaccines that they in the safety
Mm.
trials, they only compared them to a different vaccine that was given.
Right.
It was never against a placebo, like a water or a saline.
Right.
So basically they're saying this doesn't cause, and I don't know what you're allowed to say. You said it's Spotify and YouTube. So this does not cause any adverse reaction, but they're not saying based on giving this
Mm-hmm.
vaccine compared to that vaccine, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
think that it's against a saline and it's not. So I think we're
Mm-hmm.
healthier because now we are not
Yeah,
pumping our
where
body with, I know mercury's not really in a lot of them anymore, but we're not pumping our body with aluminum and all that. But we
yeah.
also read labels. I try not to give them, like the ibuprofen. I know a lot of homeschoolers will only do homeopathic stuff. I mean, I grew up probably taking so much. You know, my mother get here Tylenol for this, Tylenol for that. I don't know how
Yeah.
I'm alive still, but um, but like we try to be at least be aware. What else could we try
Yeah.
first? Through reading labels,
Mm-hmm.
we'll get like half a cow and a half a pig. Now that's like
Yeah.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
getting the grocery market stuff. And
Yeah.
so just little things like that, I think
Yeah.
pay off in the long run. But it's also important to not be like so strict that you're stressing yourself out
That's right.
because, like I
Yeah,
said in the
that's right.
beginning, our bodies can handle a lot and there's a lot worse going on in the world.
Yeah,
So yeah, just trying
that's
to
great.
be more conscious of it.
Yeah, I
And
think
I and
that's
I
so important.
you said about the well-being too. And you know what I love to mention here is that like I was totally that girl that like I grew up watching Friends and Sex in the City and
Mm-hmm.
I was like loved this lifestyle of like, oh, I have my own money and I don't need a man and all
Mm-hmm.
that, right? Everything that
Yeah.
like the media told us was wonderful.
Yeah.
But part of my sort of like awakening was that wow, they back in the 60s the women's movement was actually the government's push to get women into the workforce to double the
Mm-hmm.
tax base and get a hold of our
Yeah.
kids sooner. And that sounds
Mm-hmm.
crazy, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
evidence to it.
Yeah.
And I just think now that I'm home, I have one more of an appreciation for what my husband's role is in
Mm-hmm.
this
Yeah.
family. I think
Yeah.
he feels more like okay, I'm needed because like I'm bringing home the money so that
Mm.
my family
Yeah.
can live their lives. So he
Yeah.
feels like yeah, without me, they like there's just a certain like respect for yourself when you know that you're
Yeah.
needed. And then
Yeah.
my role as, yes, I have ways that I bring in money, having my own business and whatnot. But that's a lot of that is stuff that I use to travel with, so that we can take a vacation every year.
Right.
I have more of like a respect for him. I think he has more of a respect for me. And I don't
Mm.
think we would have actually been there had I been spending. I mean, do you know how many affairs I saw working for the government? It was like these people, they just
Mm.
hated their spouses. They came to work, complained about them to other people. They were all
Mm-hmm.
bored because they were all just sitting in a cubicle all day doing mostly
Yeah.
nothing and complaining to each other. And then one thing leads to another. And I just saw so many affairs. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I can clearly, like, it's laid out, like, how
Yeah.
easy this happens. And
Yeah.
not to say it doesn't happen when the husband's at work and the wife's at home, or the
Right.
wife's
Right.
working and the
Right. I know
husband's
what
home
you're
with the
saying.
kids. But there's a different dynamic. It kind of brings you back to like maybe the roots of what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. And then if a family kind of wants to get back to the roots of what it can be, I'll give a little backstory and then I'll let you go. I promise. I don't want to keep you on for too long, but I have someone that I know who was very interested in homeschooling, actually two people that I recently talked to. And it's almost like the families, like the actual parents can't let go of the public school system, but the kids are ready. So what advice would you have for families like that? Like where the mom is just loving that life, but the kids are really feeling the brunt of that life.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And
Mhm.
I've heard of that too, where the kids are like,
Yeah.
I don't want to learn this way. I don't want to be sitting in
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
teacher is mean.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's like you're scared to step out of the norm, or you've created humans that you don't even want to be around. So it is
Mm-hmm.
your responsibility as the parent to
Yeah.
teach them, model
That's
for them
right.
how they should be, correct them when they're wrong, explain to them why
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have more opportunities and advantages in life if people enjoy them.
That's right.
And I it can be scary. I think having a list written down of your rebuttals, like we talked about before, like
So
this
important.
is why I make it. And no, you don't owe anybody an explanation. I know that I hear that all the time.
Sure.
But I think for our own, like well-being. Hey, write
Yeah.
it down. Why are you doing
Hmm.
this? Because if you know, then yes, you don't have to answer anybody. But if you want to answer them, sometimes it's just a grandparent caring about your choices and what you're
That's
doing.
right.
Um, or they think you're crazy and you need to just tell them why you're not crazy. But
Yeah.
having that written down. And then what I would recommend is there is a documentary that came out recently called The Death of Recess, and you can watch it on the Angel Network. So,
Mm.
like, what I did is I love the Angel Network anyway. I
Yeah.
would just have this subscription because the Tuttle Twins TV is on it and all that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
like you can just do a 1 month. So like cancel it as soon as you get it. It's like $8.99. And you can watch this documentary and show
Mm.
it to your spouse. And this guy, Spencer Taylor, he basically researched why we do education the way we do it here, which was a Prussian model that we brought over to
Right.
create
Yeah.
obedient workers.
Hmm.
But then he went to other countries to look at how they educate. And then he was looking at numbers on who is the most happiest, out of all the people
Mm.
who Finland is, one of the
Yeah.
countries that is the most happiest. And well, how do they educate? And what are they doing differently? What he also did, which is so brilliant, is the NEA, the National Education Association, is the biggest teachers union that we have. And he talks
Hmm.
about the amount of money that goes into this teachers union. So anybody that's a teacher
Hmm.
gets union dues taken out of their paycheck. And then they get funding from this politician and that politician. And then in turn, they, do stuff for the politicians and, all of that
Yeah.
lobbying. But he snuck into their convention and recorded some of the things they were saying. And I mean, right down to the indoctrination that is happening in the
Hmm.
school system,
Mm.
the social emotional learning, which sounds like they're just teaching your kid how to regulate their emotions. Oh, how do you feel today? This is an exercise
Yeah.
we can do. But then it slowly goes into maybe you feel that way because you're in the wrong gender, and how they are
Mm.
actually pushing kids. The pharmaceutical, again, lobbying pharmaceutical companies are pushing to have this sort of curriculum
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
schools. And teachers think they're doing the right thing by helping kids. They think they're
Mm.
helping. And it's really just, they think the parents are the bad ones. They don't understand. It's just such a division of the family unit,
Yeah.
and it's really going on. So that I would recommend that documentary to
Mm.
any parent who has a little ounce of like, I
Yeah.
want to homeschool in me, or I want to homeschool and my spouse doesn't, or, I don't
Yeah.
think I could homeschool. Watch that, because you literally watch it and you're like, oh, I can't do worse. I can't do worse for my kids.
That's right. And then do you have any books you recommend as well?
Oh, yeah. So John Taylor Gatto is,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, an amazing
Mm.
man who he was a New York State Teacher of the Year. And I think on the
Hmm.
same year he resigned, and he wrote a book called, he wrote a few books, Dumbing Us Down, and I think The Underground History of the Education System. But I would
Hmm.
start with Dumbing Us Down. It's just an easier read. And it
Yeah.
talks all about the history of, how we got here and why education and what he saw in the classroom too.
Yeah.
And Free to Learn from Dr. Peter Gray is also
Hmm.
another amazing book on how kids will actually learn even if you don't put any ounce of curriculum in front of them, like
Hmm. Hmm.
giving them
Yeah.
time and resources to just explore.
That's right.
And he was, that was never his area. He was like I think he was a psychologist. I've had him on my podcast too, but he talks about how he was a
Awesome.
psychologist, and then his son was just not doing well in school, and like
Hmm.
how embarrassing is that as like a psychologist, and like your kid is
Yeah,
the one
right.
that can't function in the classroom. But his son up and they decided this school route isn't for him. They enrolled him
Wow.
in a different type of school, and where they actually didn't have any curriculum. And so Dr. Gray kind of went into researching like, okay, what is going on with the kids that actually graduate from this type of system?
Yeah.
What do they become later in life? And
Hmm.
it led him to write the book Free to Learn, and he has another book coming out
Yeah.
now. Um, and let's see, another one I mentioned earlier, Alex Newman
Mm.
has the Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. And that's very eye opening too, and what they are
Yeah.
actually teaching in the school system.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and that's just important, I think, even just when you say in conversation, like, I read this book, this is this guy's perspective. I think you don't even have to say where you stand, but it just gives a little bit of like planting that seed for people who are listening. Like, I'll often say, yeah, so a lot of families are homeschooling now. It's around like 3.5 million last I checked statistics. And they just kind of look at me like, oh, okay, that's a lot of people. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And then I throw in like, there's a lot of teachers leaving the system. And then they look at me again like, oh, wow. And I'm like, yeah, I love my job. Yeah, so I think that's really important that you share that stuff. And I really appreciate that you shared those resources because I think that's awesome. And it gives people food for thought when they're considering this.
Yeah. And those are just kind of the books that are like exposing the reality of what is. And
Hmm.
then there's books that are just like, hey, this is how we homeschool and this is how you can
Yeah,
like
exactly.
have
Like a
this
manual.
beautiful type of life. And let me get one of those for you now.
No, it's all
I
good. I
feel
just don't
bad.
want to keep you.
You're gonna have
I
so
just
much
don't want to keep you.
editing.
No, no, it's all
No,
good.
let
It's
me
all
get because I had a good one that I read.
No, you're all good. Take your time. I just didn't want to keep you because I know you have your kids.
I don't hear any screaming yet. Where is it? Oh my goodness. I should have had all this prepared.
Oh, don't even worry about it. It's all good.
Um, oh my goodness.
No, this is stuff
Here.
I like to write down for me because I'll read it for research.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my quick start guide. I have it in there. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So another book that would be awesome just for like how to homeschool, like what does the day to day look like? Other
Hmm.
than my ebook. Uh, but The Brave Learner by Julie Bogart
Yes,
was a
I
great
love
read
her.
too.
We
Yeah.
had her on a couple months ago and she's awesome.
Oh, great. Oh,
Yeah.
I've never even thought about having her come on because it's
Oh,
just like
she's so sweet.
usually
She's
people
so
just
sweet.
reach out to me. I don't do a lot of outreach, but that would be a great one.
Yeah, she's very, very sweet. I love talking to her and just like her perspective on writing and how we can teach writing in a very creative and relaxed way. It's really neat. Really,
Yeah.
really neat. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate all the resources you provided and just your thoughts. I think families are really going to take away a lot from this and just your encouragement and like your information was amazing.
Oh, thank you so much, Beth. Thank you for having me on, and I'll be happy
Of
to share
course.
this.
Thank
I
you.
think, yeah, you're doing amazing work getting the word out there.
Thank you so much.